Hello and welcome to this video about Cisco Modeling Labs. I'm going to talk about device access in Cisco Modeling Labs. This was something that I wanted to do for quite a long time already because I have the feeling that not every feature that deals with device access is widely known within our community. So I wanted to touch on all of these different features that have been built into Cisco Modeling Labs over the years. And this is going to be quite a bit of a lengthy video, but I'm going to break it down into chapters, and I'm going to put the chapters into the description of the video so that you can jump to the section that you're most interested in. So in terms of sections, what do we have? Obviously, I'm starting with the device access within the user interface. So that's the normal way, and probably everyone is familiar with how to access a serial console of a routing device or of a device within a lab topology in general, or a VNC screen for graphical user interfaces within nodes. What is not widely known is how you can customize these things. And that is something that I wanted to point out in the UI section. So specific customizations for fonts, for the serial line that you are going to use, and these kind of things. In the next section, I'm going to talk about secure shell access. And this is kind of an intermediate step where we are going to add a secure shell key into Cisco Modeling Labs to facilitate the access to the terminal server, which is then going to be covered in the next section. So terminal server is something that I think is not widely used, but I think it's a very powerful feature, especially if you are into automation or if you are more of a command line person. So the terminal server gives you all of that in, as the name suggests, in a terminal server. Then the fourth chapter or section is talking about the Breakout tool, which is a separate component that you can install locally on your computer and which allows you to securely and encrypted and authenticated access your devices within a lab. That could be on the same machine, but it could also be in a remote location, maybe in a data center or something where your CML instance is hosted. And this allows you to run native applications like secure CRT or your favorite VNC client locally on your laptop, and then access the resources, the devices within your CML lab in a, as I said, in a data center, for example. As of late, we also offer the ability, and as of late is since 2.10, we offer the capability to run Wireshark locally and capture packets remotely. So that's also something that is enabled by using the Breakout tool. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about PADI, which is also somewhat underserved or not known widely, in my opinion, which also helps you to access devices within your lab, whether these are just generic TCP or UDP connections, or whether they are secure terminal access, like console access, serial port access, or VNC access. So that all can be done using PADI. So that pretty much covers the talk or the video. And now let's get into our lab. So this is my CML instance. As you can tell, it has a cert installed, so I can also save my password, which is kind of the perks here, that if you have a proper cert and it matches your host name, that you can save your password. So password is in here. This runs 2.10 build 13, so that's the released version. So let's log in here, and as you see here, we have a lab that is already up and running. So within this lab, oops, I have a couple of nodes. So this is just, it doesn't serve any particular purpose besides me showing you access or how you can access these devices. There is 2 nodes in here which are not included by default in the system, which is the Kali node here, which I added to use some of the wireless features that have been added with 2.10, so which is kind of nice. So the Kali allows me to use the Wi-Fi interface that is now available with 2.10, or the capability that is available with 2.10. And I also added a Windows 11 node. I have a video of how to create Windows 11 nodes and make them available within CML. I can also link that video down in the description. And this will be used for the Breakout tool and remote desktop RDP access to the Windows instance here. Then there is an Nginx. This is a Nginx instance. This is a container and some infrastructure. So important here is that for PADI, which we will see in the last section, all of this is pretty much like layer 2 connected. So these are external connectors which go to my virtual bridge. So they are going to be NATed to the outside world, which facilitates the use of PADI. Now, all right, so as I said, most people are probably familiar with how to use the interface in here. So if I click on this guy, for example, and say, or maybe on this guy and say like console, I get my panel down here and I can open up my console and I get my login prompt, obviously. I log in here using Kali. But that's standard fare, and we just as you can see here, like, you know, standard color, standard font. So this uses the standard mono font that is available on the system. But what if you don't like this? What if you want to customize this further? And this is where probably not a lot of people, or maybe not all people, have figured out how to do this. And the way to do this is by right-clicking on this tab. And as you can see here, we have a couple of options here. And one of the options is the global console settings. So if you click here, you get this menu, and then you can specify a couple of things. So first of all, console size. This is a bit of a hot topic, or a bit of a contentious topic. I usually want to have those things set specifically to 80 and 24 because those serial consoles, they are pretty dumb. They don't understand window sizes and how many columns there are available, etc., etc. So setting this to 80 and 24 is pretty much a safe standard, but I mean, it works. It's really like up to you about what's the right answer here or not. Now, history, this is the stuff that is being loaded. So if I go back out here and close this again, and then right click here again and say console and open, you will see that it loads the history of what has been sent to the console. And this is what that toggle here, or what the checkbox here does. And you can specify how many lines it will load. The next thing is whether it should auto connect. This is also usually a safe default, so that you want to click this and say, hey, whenever the node comes up, or whenever I open up a console or like a tab or something, I don't want to click on that button that is in the middle that I just did. I want to auto connect the thing right away. Now, the interesting pieces are then the last three, right? So first of all, there is a theme that you can specify what kind of color theme you want to have in the terminal, whatever. I mean, retro I think is green. Then there is the font size. Let's put in 16. And then there is this button down here, which allows you to select the font. So this LMW basically means that they are tested or known to be working, no guarantee though, on Linux, Mac, and Windows. So it always depends on what kind of fonts you have installed, etc. But they are usually known to work on these things, on these platforms. Now, you're not forced to use any of these. And if you have installed custom fonts on your machine, then you can use them. And the tricky bit here is that the browser APIs, they are not usually allowing or easily allowing to query what fonts are installed on a machine for security reasons and whatnot, sandbox isolation. But if you know the name of the font, then you can basically enter the font name down here. So I have a font that is called Cascadia Cove Nerd font. And if I have not mistyped it, then this should be it. Now, I changed the font size, I changed the color, and I typed in the name of the font. Let's hope, fingers crossed. And you can see that this now looks completely different. So this is now using this new font, this Cascadia Cove font. It uses green, if you like it or not. And it also has a slightly bigger size. So let's just change this again to see the effect and do 18, for example. And you see, I mean, this is not the standard font. This is this Cascadia font that I have installed on my system. Be aware that you need to figure out what that string needs to look like. And if it doesn't match, I mean, we can just do the proof here. So if I put in something like this, then it looks ugly. So you immediately see, okay, so this was not the right font name. So let's switch this back and remove the S's here and then save again. So this is good, right? All right, what else do we have here? So the other thing that we have here is download. Obviously, we can download the logs. But one thing that is also very interesting, and this doesn't necessarily work with the Kali Linux, but on iOS, for example, you might know that there is a console serial port and then there is an aux serial port, like a second console that you also can physically connect to on a router typically. And to access that additional port, you can switch between those ports. And as you can see here, there's only one line here on this box. But if there would be two, then you could select the other one and can choose this one. Actually, I could show you on this guy here, console. On this guy, there is two ports, right? So the first port, this is what we are currently looking at, is the Nginx log, so the access log of the machine, which looks kind of weird right now. But anyway, and the second port, or the second line, I should say, is then a shell. So you get a shell inside into Nginx, and you see that there's the Nginx process, so you can interact with the thing using the other serial line. Okay, and what else? I mean, obviously not much more, but what also is kind of interesting, you can move these guys around, and something that also not a lot of people have used, or that I haven't seen them using, is the ability to create multiple panes, and you can have multiple terminals at the same time, side by side, and even more if you're interested. So if you have a wide screen, for example. Right? All right, so let's close this one down and let's move on to the next chapter, which is VNC. So again, VNC, if a device supports VNC, we will have the menu entry here enabled to access the VNC tab or the VNC tabs. So again, we can open the VNC session, and then we get the graphical screen or the KVM, the keyboard video mouse, for that particular node instance. So in this case, Kali. And yeah, that's my VNC screen here. Nothing fancy there. There is again a right-click menu on this button, or on the tab, I should say. So first of all, there is a Send Control-Alt-Delete button. So that is useful if you have a Windows Server instance, for example, where you only can log in by pressing Control-Alt and Delete. And that is kind of tricky because if I hit Control-Alt-Delete right now on my machine, that would be sent to the operating system that runs my browser and not to Kali Linux. So how do you send that to Kali Linux or to Windows or whatever? And this is how, right? So you right click on the thing, you have the option to say Control-Alt-Delete. The next option here is open up the entire thing in full screen. Now, I won't do this right now because that would mess up my entire recording setup here, but obviously it will turn your Kali Linux session into full screen mode and you can interact with it. There is one caveat right now, which is that we don't lock the keyboard, or there is also browser support issues, so locking keyboard so that you can actually do Control-Alt-Delete in full screen, or hit escape, or do Windows tab and these kind of things. To capture these keystrokes, the browser needs to support this keyboard locking API, and right now this is only any Chromium-based browser that does this. So Firefox doesn't do it, and Safari doesn't do it, but Chrome, Chromium, Brave, the DuckDuckGo browser, for example, and also Opera, I think, is also in the meantime Chromium-based. Edge, they all support it. So that's kind of a useful thing, and that's going to be in 2.10.1. So we are going to have that feature so that you can use like these special key presses like Control Alt Delete or Escape or something within full screen, which is kind of useful. Because right now, if you go into full screen and, for example, sit in VI in an editor or something and you press Escape, because that's the usual thing you do, full screen ends, which is kind of inconvenient, but yeah, that will be there. The next thing here is that we do support paste passwords or whatnot into the VNC session. And the caveat here is that you need to be aware that this doesn't support any language or country specific keyboards. So like German umlauts, for example, no, because this really acts in a way as if it presses keys, and this needs to have translations and whatnot, so keyboard translations and all of that stuff to support all sorts of international keyboards, which we do not do. Like ASCII is fine, but international keyboards won't work or won't work properly. And if you have accented characters and whatnot, that's not going to work. So what I did, I copied this thing here, and then if I go in here and hit paste, then it should show up as you see. So this is useful if you have complex passwords or something. Again, as I said, unless they don't have any fancy characters in there, and if they're like strictly ASCII, then this works perfectly fine. And yeah, that's it. So that is the built-in VNC capability with the right-click menu here that allows you to do some more stuff that is not necessarily visible right away. All right, now let's close this down and let's move on to the next chapter. As I said, the ability to use terminals, and especially on the command line, requires you to authenticate to CML using a username and a password, your username and the password as set in the application. Wouldn't it be nice if we could also use secure shell keys? Because that's kind of the gold standard for anything automation, that we can log in the system without using or providing any usernames and passwords. And this is what we have built into CML a couple of versions ago already. So that is something that is not enabled by default. So we will see this now. Let's go here and say settings. And as you see, there's an option that says public key. If I click this, it says right now console server SSH public key configuration is globally disabled. Huh. Okay, so what do we do to enable this? Here's how. So I'm going to switch to my terminal, and this is actually not too bad. Let's just back out of here. So this is basically my server, and I'm having I'm logging into the server using my sysadmin user and on port 1122. So again, you need to enable SSH access to your server. And as you might remember, on port 22, there is the terminal server running, so which is something that we cover in a minute. And the standard secure shell operating system port that we are using is 1122. So this is what this parameter here specifies. So I have secure shell authentication already enabled on this thing, but that's not what I'm looking here right now. Otherwise, I would have to provide my password, my password for the sysadmin user. Anyway, so I'm going to edit this file, etc defaults file 2. Oh shit. Let's see this. Right, and then search for SSH. And as you see here, if this is set to true when the SSH terminal server will, then the SSH terminal server will accept public keys for authentication. There is a bit of a security implication here, so not everyone wants to have this in the way that the authentication happens internally, that there is like some bits being copied back and forth between the SSH component and the controller component, which has the database. That is something why we thought that it might be better to turn it off. But in general, it's kind of, especially on personal machines, no problem at all. So I put in on here and save this. And now what we need to do is we actually need to start or restart the services. So, and the typical way to do this is just by restarting the target and restart everything. So that should be fine. And say system control restart virtual2 target. So here we go. And as you see here, server disconnected, and it will throw me to the login page, I guess, in a minute. Maybe not. There we go. And it's still not booted because you can see down here, or like started completely because it doesn't show the version here. So we can reload it again. Takes a bit of time. Well, let's just log in. Backend error, is the controller running? Oh, that's awesome. Now it's running. It's still not fully up. So there's now green, and then the last one that will show up green is likely this guy. Yeah, okay, so all three are green. We got a green okay down here, so everything is good again. Now, if we go back to the settings page here and click on public key, and now the yellow banner has been, or has changed into the blue banner here because we have not set any public key right now. Now, how do we get the public key? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new terminal here and do a cat ssh id rsa pub. So this is my public key that I'm using for most of the stuff, and I can simply copy this public key. And how to create a secure shell public key and use that within system administration, etc., is a bit out of scope for this demo. I'm just assuming that you do have a public key already for SSH, but you know, it's a quick Google search or like a search, or maybe AI helps you to do all of this stuff if you haven't done it before. But this is my public key here, so I'm going to take this, copy it, and paste it in here. And now I can set my public key. Boom. And as you see, it kind of reads what's in the public key, tells me the fingerprint, tells me the size, etc. So now my key is set to my user, and I can now use my key to authenticate to the system for terminal server access, for example. And this is what we are going to do next in the next chapter. So for this, I'm going to my terminal here again, and then do a ping cml 2.10-webinar. And this is my machine. So this is where my CML instance is running. And now I can do a secure shell and do a admin at CML webinar. So this, and I have connected to the thing already, otherwise you would see something like, okay, this key is unknown or something. So now it asks me not for a username or not for a password, because the username is already provided. I provided the username up here. But without the secure shell or the public key that I put into CML, it would ask me for my password. But it doesn't ask me for my password right now. It asks me for the passphrase for my local public key, or for my local private key, for my SSH key. And this is this. And now I'm connected to my terminal server. Now, my terminal server, and by the way, this would also work without setting the SSH key. So that is not a strict requirement. You can always put in your password, right? And now my terminal server allows me to do all sorts of interesting things. So there is a bit of a command line help. So there are a couple of commands, obvious commands like, clear the screen and, do switch between UUID and text output, for example. But the most interesting one is the list command here. List and open, those are the ones that are interesting in this context. So I can do list, and I see what nodes are currently available on my host. And these are the labs that I have access to, right? So I see there is the lab, Kali and Win11, and there's a couple of nodes in here, and you see that there is also lines associated with those nodes. And you see that there is Nginx, which has 2 lines, and then there is like Alpine and all the rest that has just 1 line, and line is basically the serial port of that device. Now I can do open, and the nomenclature, or like the way you type this in, is by typing a tab and you can always do tab complete. So by just having it here and I'm hitting tab, it completes it because there's only one lab. So it completes it to this specific lab. And then I hit tab again, and then I get the nodes that are available in here. So I can tab through those, or I can start typing, let's say Nginx, and I want to be on Nginx on the actual shell. So that would be this one. And then I just hit return, and I'm on the shell right now. So this is the terminal server functionality where you access things within a secure shell session. So remember, you always have to authenticate and do everything encrypted and not in telnet. So this is the way how you do this. And to get out of it, there is a escape character. So this guy here. So this is control square closing square bracket. That gets me back to the current terminal server. So I get disconnected, and I now can do a list again. I can say, okay, I want to connect to, let's say, my Kali Linux, for example. So if I do open Kali, and there is only one port, and I get onto the console of my Kali server. And as you might have known already, so this is all, let's go here and let's do the console. So this is all in sync multiplexed, right? So if I do something, if I type something here, it's also happening on all consoles that are having a user attached. So you will see that across the place. All right, so that is the terminal server, how you access lines within terminal server, but it doesn't stop here. And it's pretty much more interesting if you, again, are into automation. And let's quit here and then do a quit here. Because what we can do is we can, first of all, we can add these secure shell keys and the passwords into into password managers, etc. Like on the Mac, this is called the, what's it called, login or something. I don't know. But basically the need for entering the passphrase for that private key, that can be done by the operating system, by my local operating system here. So I can provide the password into a keychain. A keychain is the right word, so that I don't have to put in the password every time when I log into the system. So that makes it password less. You just have to be authenticated on the operating system to make that happen. And the other thing, and that's something that I'm going to show you now, is you can avoid that menu inside of the terminal server entirely by providing the command on the command line. And you have seen something like this already. So we can say, no, actually, wait, dash admin, yeah, this one. So this basically here. So as you remember, within the terminal server, in the menu, I could say list and open and whatnot, right? But I can provide this command right away before I even log into the system. So to remove all the interactivity and just say, okay, I know this is the name of my lab. And by the way, you can also use UUIDs for this, so that it's kind of very unique, UUIDs, unique identifiers. You don't have to rely on the strings and whatnot, but in this case, it's much more friendly to the eye. So I know this is my Kali and Win11 lab, and I know I want to connect to Kali-0 on the first serial port because there's only one. So I could provide this entire thing here and say return. Now, this does not work. So let's again put in my password here, or passphrase, because it will tell me that it cannot use the TTY, which is basically the terminal here. So we need to, and this is the hint here, we need to provide this, and then it does work. So just wanted to show the negative example here. And as you can tell here, now I'm connected, and you see that there is a connecting to console on Kali-0, and I'm connected to the terminal server, but transparently in one go without having to deal with the menu in there. And by hitting return, I'm getting my prompt, and here we are. And you can see back here that I'm truly connected to this thing. And just by providing a single command line going exactly to what or to where I want to go without providing the password for the admin user. I only provided the password for my key here. And as I said before, if I would have put that password into my keychain on macOS, and there's a similar thing for Linux, for example, then I would not have been prompted for anything. And this is what you would use in automation to talk to these devices, to, let's say, have Ansible or something talk to your devices inside of a CML lab. All right, so this concludes the terminal server. Out of here. Okay, disconnected. And the next section is going to talk about the Breakout. Now, the Breakout itself is built or is shipped with CML. So Breakout is being found here. And you see there's also some description, some how you use it, etc., etc. And the actual Breakout is a binary, or a couple of binaries that are built by us, which are included into CML, and they come in different flavors. So there's one for Linux, or two actually for Linux, two for Windows, two for Mac, and one for Windows. I've downloaded this Darwin one on Mac, and if you're on Windows and Linux, you need to download the appropriate one. And for the right architecture, if you have an AMD or a ARM chip. And I've put this into my demo folder here. So this is here already. Now, what you need to do if you download the thing is you need to do a change mod and make it executable, at least on macOS, and on Linux. On Windows, it's slightly different, but also not a big deal. Now, on Linux, it's done. At this point in time, you can run it. On macOS, it's a bit more complicated, and there's various ways to do this. The easiest way that I've found, or that I think is the easiest way, is to circumvent this secure or signing or notarization thing that Mac imposes on all the applications and executables that should be running on a system. And if you don't do this, then the application would simply not start, and it would recommend to throw it into the trash. So the easiest way to get or to avoid this situation is by doing the following. So you open up your preferences, your system preferences, and then you go down to privacy and security. And within privacy and security, there is a section that is called developer tools. And within developer tools, by default, there is only one application, which is terminal, and it's off, right? I'm using Ghosty as a terminal application. So I added Ghosty by using this button here. I added Ghosty in here, and I turned these two on. So what this does is basically it says, okay, when you run unsigned binaries within the terminal or within Ghosty, then don't check that pesky signature and whatnot. So yeah, so that's how I did it. And proof is that I can run my Breakout tool here. So Breakout runs, it prints out the information, etc., etc. I have it running over here. So I just want to give you a brief overview of how you could use Breakout in a very efficient way. I've shown this at some other occasion already, but what you typically do is you run Breakout, actually like this, Breakout, and then do a config. Well, actually you can do like help, right? And help says, okay, so there's a couple of things. There's like config, there's init, there's run, and UI. Most people just use UI because that provides a local web server and you can click and point and click and whatnot. If you're more a CLI guy, then you probably want to use the config, init, and run, which is what I prefer. And as I said, when you do a config, it writes a config file. So this is the config file that it writes. And so you put in the name of the controller. You typically change this from listen address, the IPv6 localhost address, to localhost. I found that a bit more convenient. Maybe we should change this like the default here to localhost. And then the other thing that you typically want to change is the verified TLS, because that one, if you don't have a trusted cert, which in my case I do have a trusted cert, but if you don't have one, then you need to set this to false. And the rest could be left pretty much at the defaults. Now, what I also did is I have my my password set in the environment. So because if you set the password in here, it won't be saved. So that's kind of a security measure that you don't have your passwords inside of the configuration file. And then what you do is you do a -breakout init, and that takes the configuration information, it talks to the controller, it pulls all the information from the controller, and it writes a lab file. So that lab file is now here, and the only thing that I need to do here in the lab file, if there is multiple labs running at the same time, is I just need to search for the enabled key, the first one, this one, and I need to set this to true. I mean, this is something that you can do in the UI. I'm just a CLI guy, so for that reason I like to do it this way. So I set this to true, which basically means, okay, use this lab when I say run. And this is what it prints when I say run. It takes the information about this lab, and you can see that there is the 5 or 6 nodes that I have available, and the ports that are being opened up locally on my machine here so that I can connect to these instances. All right, so, and for this, I now can go in and say, let's say VNC viewer. So we have a VNC viewer here, and I want to connect to my Windows instance, so that would be localhost on port 5902. So let's put in localhost 5902, and it warns me about a unencrypted connection. That's fine because it's in the breakout. And now here we are. I have my Windows. Yeah, it's fine. I don't want this. I have my Windows session here. I can click. Well, it's VNC. It's over the network, and I put in Cisco in my case, and I have my Windows session here. So that's nifty, and allows me to access my VNC devices or my VNC sessions, my graphical sessions on my CML instance using a local tool of my choice. Let's exit here. Let's get rid of this. And same goes for other applications or for other devices here, like the Kali Linux would be the same thing. And for serial, I can do, let's go here. So what do you have? Let's say we want to go to Kali, that would be this port here. So telnet, localhost 9001. And now I'm at my Kali Linux. And again, this is the serial console of my Kali Linux. This is not SSH or something. This is just like another way to access the serial console on Kali Linux. All right. If we have PCAPs like Wireshark, etc., they would also be available using Breakout. For that, I would recommend using the UI instead of the CLI here. All right, so that's the Breakout tool. For completeness sake, I can use the UI here. So now it starts the server here on port 8080. So if we go here and open this up, then we see the Breakout tool, and we see our lab. We see that it's started. We can click in here. We see all the different ports that are available and the configuration for these ports. And if there would be any Wireshark or packet captures running, then we would be seeing those here. All right, let's close this down. And that brings me to the last section, which is PADI. Now there is some documentation. If you look for Cisco Modeling Labs and PADI and documentation, then there is this link here, which is something that I've created back in the days when this was created, or when we created this and included it into the product. And this basically gives you the overview and how this is being used, right? The important bit here really is that for all of these things, except for serial and for the VNC access, no, the other way around. PADI is not enabled by default. So you need to, or you at least need to ensure that it is enabled. So sometimes the service, in my case, it wasn't running, so I had to enable it. So that's kind of a verification step. The second thing is that PADI by default is only enabled to do the port address translation part. So to allow you to punch holes into your firewall and to port forward ports into your lab. Device access for serial consoles and VNC devices is not enabled by default. So that's again something that has security implications. You don't want to have those ports opened up on your CML controller because they are usually unauthenticated, and that's the reason why this is disabled by default. So how do you do this? And by the way, I'm putting these links also into the description, right? So let's see, this is the breakout, so we can stop this. And this is our shell. And let's do sudo vi etc default and PADI. So this is the configuration file for PADI itself. So what you want to do is, oops, where am I? Oh, down here. What you want to do is you want to remove the hash mark in front of this line if you want to enable VNC and serial access. So this is the default, right? So it's disabled. You cannot use VNC and serial ports or serial access. If you want to use serial access, then you need to remove this hash mark here and have it this way. What I would recommend, especially if you are the only user, then I would recommend to set this down to 5 seconds or something, or maybe 10 seconds. The default is 60, so which is sometimes a bit long. This basically controls how often PADI asks the controller if there's anything new that it needs to react on, or no new devices or new port mappings or something showing up. So if you set this to 5, then that is a lot faster. All right, so this was all already the case, so we can quit here. And now the thing that you want to do is sudo system control status to PADI service, and you can see that PADI is currently running. This is what you want to see, and it's enabled, so it's coming up by default when the system boots. And you see also some messages down here that it has done something and has punched some holes into the firewall already. All right, so that's the verification step, is everything enabled and running, and also the configuration piece about the timer, like the polling timer, and the enablement of the serial and the device access. Now, if we go back to our instance here and close this down, and then we have our lab here. So how is PADI actually being configured? And as I said, this is documented here. You see that there's also the nomenclature here, how you put in the tags here in terms of what is the port name or the port number inside, outside, etc., and what tags are understood. And what we've done, or what I've done here, is I put in some tags here. So like, for example, on this Windows machine, I want to use remote desktop protocol to access the Windows 11 machine. So what did I do? I did put in this tag PAT for PADI. And then I said I want to have the TCP port 3000. So this is the outside port that is listening on my machine, on the controller, basically on this address here. So I want to have port 3000 here forwarded into Windows 11 on port 3389. And that's the port for remote desktop protocol. And one quick thing to verify whether this is going to work or not is to go onto the interfaces tab. And then you need to ensure, for PADI to work, you need to ensure that you see an address here. So this address here needs to match our address, or must be the address from this range, must be an address from this range, which shows us that this is the netted address range. So if we click on this guy here and say config, so this is verbiage 0, and this is the address that is associated with verbiage 0. And on this machine, we do see that we have an address acquired and that the system knows about this address. So if there is no address showing here, it will not work. So, and now that we have an address, an inside address, we have the tag defined, we can do something like this. So I have my remote desktop application here that runs locally on my Mac. I can look at the configuration. I have my controller name. This is the same address as this one here. I have the port. This is the address that I put into that tag as the outside TCP port. And I have configured the user credentials, Cisco in my case. And the other thing that I did ensure is that where is this? I think here. So I did disable the start session in full screen mode, because otherwise, again, my recording would be broken. So save, double click. It warns me again about a certificate, because the certificate that is being used here is created by that Windows instance. It's self-signed. I don't care. And here we go. I mean, this is now my Windows session, and this is much more snappier than the VNC console session. So it's pretty nice in the way this works. And we also got audio. So at some point, I guess. And yeah, so that's what you can use PADI for. And another way, or another thing that you can do is by, well, where are we here? And that's not the one, or is it? Here I have one for this Nginx host that listens on port 3080, but there was another one. Oh yeah, this one. So there's another one where I expose 22. So internally on this Alpine Linux machine, there is port 22, which runs secure shell on this Alpine instance. And I expose this on port 3022, again, using PADI. And this is how it looks like. Let's go here. Let's go to my Mac. So this is again on my Mac. Do a SSH. And I need to specify the port 3022 on my CML 2.10 webinar host. And I think I need to specify, or I can specify the username. So let's see if this works. So I get a connection on port 3022, and this is what it looks like when the key hasn't been seen before. So I need to accept the fingerprint of that machine. And now it asks me for my password. Put in Kali, and I cannot log in. So apparently admission is denied here, but you get the idea. So maybe, well, I guess I leave it here. So I'm not sure if Kali Linux allows me to log in here. Oh, wait. This was not Kali. Oh, my fault. Entirely my fault. Stupid me. This was not Kali. This was Alpine. So Alpine has Cisco, and here we go. So I'm now logged in using SSH into this Alpine node inside of my lab with a direct connection, thanks to PADI, that exposes these ports on my CML controller host and punches the holes into the firewall and allows me to do this direct interaction with those machines, whether this is SSH or RDP on port 3389, but we can also do like UDP for SNMP or other things that use UDP. So there's a bunch of different ways how to interact with these devices using PADI. Okay, and maybe finally, there is also one thing that I want to point out in this context is that if you have other ways or other preferred applications, like for example, some people seem to prefer secure CRT as the go-to application for all sorts of terminal access, then there is the CML community. And within the CML community, there's not only like lab topology examples or additional node definitions like for Windows or third-party routing or switching or networking devices, but there's also this folder called scripts, and within scripts there is some Python scripts or other ways of automating and facilitating access to devices, and typically this involves PADI or Breakout or other ways, or the terminal server, for example, to allow you to connect to these devices. I hope you found this useful, and thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.